President Bola Tinubu has praised the National Assembly for approving the state of emergency in Rivers State, describing it as a decisive and patriotic step to end the prolonged political crisis that paralyzed governance and threatened national economic security. He commended Senate President Godswill Akpabio, House Speaker Tajuddin Abbas, and other lawmakers for prioritizing security over partisan interests. Tinubu notes the careful review of classified security briefings, which underscored the urgent need for intervention. While the president warned that the crisis had pushed Rivers State to a dangerous tipping point, endangering oil and gas infrastructure and economic reforms. He says the emergency would protect lives, secure critical assets, and restore governance, with the sole administrator tasked with stabilization and dialogue. Reaffirming his commitment to peace and economic resilience, Tinubu urged Nigerians to support efforts to restore order.
Well, joining us now are policy analyst Chibuzo Okereke and Arise News Director of News, as I like to call him, as well as our politics editor, Sumna Samuel. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on the news tonight.
Thank you.
Well, let me begin with you, Mr. Chibuzo, here in the studio with us. We saw what played out in both chambers of the National Assembly today. What did you make of it?
Well, thank you very much. I think that for most of us who play in the legislative governance space, we can describe what happened today in the National Assembly to pass for a parliamentary or legislative coup. And there are reasons for that. You see, the National Assembly is a body governed by rules, governed by constitution, and when the National Assembly is in breach of its own procedure, it becomes a challenge for most of us who stand and support the framework of the institution. From even your news, you could understand that there was no debate on the general principles and merit of the issues within the frame by which the president declared a state of emergency. The procedure as prescribed by the standing rules of both the House and the Senate, subject to section 60 of the Constitution, is to refer that when this proclamation is read on the floor of the House or the Senate, the House will dissolve into executive section. And that is because the president had to send two important documents. One, the gazetted proclamation, and two, a compendium of background information leading to the decision he had taken. Those documents will be furnished to all members, rising from that closed door section. And the reason for closed door section is that most of the issues may be national security issues that should not be in the open. When they rise from a closed door session, a motion for the House to resolve to a committee of the whole to now debate the outcome of whatever document they have read. That is what should have happened. In the House of Reps, it appears that certain people have been selected to make comment and speak to the issues. In the Senate, we didn't even see any committee of the whole deliberation at all. And this is a very big, challenge. Now, if you also go further, in terms of the voting, I also think at this moment, the National Assembly was called to show legislative assertiveness, to show responsiveness to democracy culture in Nigeria, and they dropped the ball. Because in voting procedure in the House of Reps, for instance, is governed by Order 11 Rule 2, which prescribe that voting shall be either by voice vote or by register through division or by electronic voting. However, in a matter as serious as declaration of state of emergency and ratification thereof, you have to rely on Order 11.6, which says when a matter is of national interest, there shall be a division. A division means there shall be a vote. And the Constitution in section 305 requires that two-thirds. You cannot determine two-thirds through voice vote. But I'm more worried about opposition members because
we'll come to that.
They made a political decision.
Yeah, Mr. Chibuzo, we'll come to that.
Decision.
Let me bring in Somna Sambo at this point. Somna, I mean, we've been following events as they unfolded. Many Nigerians actually hoped against hope that the National Assembly will step up to the plate and, play the role of providing checks and balances. But alas, just like you heard Chibuzo say, it looks like the National Assembly has dropped the ball. On the issue of dissenting voices, were absent. Nobody opposed the move in the National Assembly, whether it's the red chamber or the green chamber. What does this portend? What does this tell us?
Well, there are basic requirements for parliamentary democracy. And in this instance, when we have a situation like this, the legislature, which is the number one symbol of democratic governance, will actually showcase the democratic ingredients that, the sort of civil society that we practice actually, it's all about. And some of those ingredients of parliamentary democracy were actually missing today, and that's why you see a lot of citizens are not so satisfied with this option of voice vote that was taken by the parliament today. In as much as in their own way they've satisfied the requirements of the executive, but nonetheless a lot of Nigerians are still confused as to if the requirements for meeting the constitutional requirements have actually been met. And specifically talking about what happened today, it's very clear that the federal lawmakers were under pressure, especially the governing party was under pressure to support the executive branch of government that is also governed by the governing party. And because of that, some basic things were actually left out. And some of those basic things are, for example, a lot of Nigerians are not aware if indeed both chambers actually met the quorum. Because what we could see here is the presiding officers, the Speaker of the House of Reps and the President of the Senate, trying to actually inform us that they've met the requirement. But what are the requirements? It's not just saying that there are 243 people in there. Apart from the register, everybody is still supposed to have appended his or her, signature to this requirements that has been placed before them. And like Chibuzo said, even their own rules, they did not satisfy the full requirements of their own rule. But of course, we are seeing the APC trying to see how they can protect President Tinubu's interests. But on whose interests are they at the parliament? It's at the interest of Nigerians, the interest of their constituents. While it's important for the governing party to have been seen to be supporting the executive branch of government, nonetheless, the procedures ought to have been followed in such a way that it's not just seen to have been done, but a lot of people are satisfied that it's been done the way it ought to have been done. And in this instance, the expectation of the executive has been achieved, but legitimacy has not been bestowed on this process by the National Assembly. And you know that any process that's undertaken without legitimacy, you will lose the trust of the people. And so the National Assembly seems to have been promoting what may look like the tyranny of the majority through the governing party. And if care is not taken, those who are looking at us from outside Nigeria may be looking at a situation whereby they may read the political situation in Nigeria and say that there is a state capture because the number one instrument of democracy is the National Assembly, and it looks like if Nigerians are not satisfied that 73 senators could have stayed and decided this through electronic voting and everybody is satisfied about it, or 240 House of Rep members met and they could be seen physically voting for this, then it looks like something is actually wrong, and they may actually say that we are in a situation of state capture.
Okay, thank you so much. Somna, just to state it here for our viewers watching around the world, that we reached out to the spokesperson of the Nigerian Senate and some other lawmakers from both chambers to give them the opportunity to come and explain further to Nigerians what happened today, but they were unwilling to speak. As you can tell, they did not make it to the news tonight.
They had given us their words that they will show, but you know,
Mr. Chibuzo, I wanted us to come back to the opposition, and I had to stop you initially because it's very critical and we need to talk about it fully. Apart from two voices that we saw today, both in the House of Representatives, and that includes, I need to mention their names, Obi Agwocha of the Labour Party and PDP's Fred Agbedi, who demanded a transparent head count and the number of people on the floor of the Green Chambers today. What, in your opinion, happened to opposition today? Were they convinced overwhelmingly? Was it an overwhelming lobbying, or were they coerced? Were they afraid? What happened to opposition?
Well, I think the interesting fact is among the three arms of government, it's only in the legislature that you talk about opposition and caucuses. You don't have that in the executive, you don't have that in the judiciary. And the constitution and institutional design of democracy deliberately design it in such a way that there can be different voices, dissenting voices and opinions. Unfortunately, that didn't happen today. And that is also a signal that there is a collapse of opposition in the parliament on one hand. Two, that the implication of this in terms of power dynamics and power relation between federal government and state government as sovereign subnational body is also a very big issue. But talking about the two members you mentioned, I keep saying maybe turnover is taking a toll on the National Assembly. You see, motion is the oil with which you eat the food of parliamentary business. Right. You cannot suggest anything to the parliament. And the speaker is very experienced. The Senate president also has been very groomed and experienced. Both members didn't table any motion. They simply suggested that the head count should be taken. And in a politically tense parliament like this, people understand that if you don't table a motion, you won't capture the principal officer to ask for a seconder and dispose that motion before he proceeds. So that was what I found, challenging in with what Honorable Agwocha moved. Yes, he moved for a division, but did not table the motion. And a division motion should be moved before a vote is taken. Right. Because in line with Order 11.6 on voting, there should be a votion on matter of national public interest regarding state of emergency. The second member too from Bayelsa didn't table any motion, and the speaker was smart to say your point of order is noted. I always encourage that when you want to achieve anything from assembly, you have to table a motion. No speaker or president of the Senate can vacate a motion without a seconder. When you table a motion, a seconder is only when there is no seconder, then that motion is vacated. So maybe they should have tabled the motion for relying on Order 4. Order 4 is about quorum. If he was focusing on quorum for them to determine quorum, and if you move a motion that this House does not have the quorum to carry on the business of the day, the speaker must ask for a seconder. He can't vacate it. Then if you move a motion for division of the House to take a vote, he must ask for a seconder before that motion is disposed of. Those issues did not happen, and it appears that the opposition parties have been whipped into line to make sure that this particular state of emergency is ratified by the National Assembly.
Samuel, let me bring you in. There's always a talk about rubber stamp National Assembly. Is that what we're seeing now, especially when you hear from the president actually commending the Senate President, Godswill Akpabio, and the Speaker, Tajuddin Abbas, saying, look, their move is in patriotic fervor. What has this done to Nigeria's democracy? Does it deepen it? And is this a rubber stamp assembly that we have on our hands? What are the implications?
Well, this is not the first time that we're handling this sort of, proclamation request. We've had that several times, like we've noticed in previous governments. But one thing that I will bring to the fore here is that President Tinubu tried to play smart on these lawmakers, and some of them actually have sympathy for him, including those in the opposition, because President Tinubu himself, you would know, is a former federal lawmaker, a senator who represented Lagos West in the aborted Third Republic. Now, the Vice President, Kashim Shettima, is also a former federal lawmaker. And then, of course, President Tinubu's wife is also a former federal lawmaker, former senator too. And then, of course, the President Chief of Staff, so they would have rolled all this experience together to be able to see how they lobby a lot of federal lawmakers. And then some of those in the opposition may have actually have been offered something else in exchange for this support, because it just beggars belief why parties like the Labour Party, even the SDP that's coming up and all of that, wouldn't want to do much more than they did, especially in the House. Because there are different parliamentary tactics to this. If not for anything, if it's just to show that, to just put up a public display, including staging a walkout, if indeed you're not happy with the way the governing party may want to use what it's usually called the tyranny of the majority in the House or Senate to actually, bulldoze their way into what we have seen. Whatever has happened has already happened, but this speaks to the kind of federal lawmakers that we elect. Nigerians should know that as we head into the elections in 2027, they have to really think about those they elect very well. Because, Ngozi, for example, you would have loved to know where your senator or your House of Rep member voted. Because you're a constituent and you have a senator and a House member. It's your right as a constituent to know where your senator or your House member voted on this issue, but you were deprived of that right. And I'm very sure Adeswa would have also loved to know what her senator, or her House member actually voted or said on this. And then they cannot question the lawmaker and say, why did you vote for this? Why didn't you vote for this and all of that? But that is the democratic right, the constitutional right, the parliamentary right that constituents have just been denied today by that decision to go on voice vote and not go on electronic voting or division like Chibuzo said, because these things were placed in the Constitution specifically because the original thinking of the founders of the country, the drafters of the Constitution, is that those who send their parliamentarians to the parliament, they have the inherent right to know where their parliamentarians vote or stand on national issues. So did they get to know today? Well, they didn't get to know. Yeah. And so this is a loss for Nigeria's democracy. It means we are not advancing, and the presiding officers, as much as they would have been smiling to the to the executive right now, because they are from the same party and all of that. Yeah. Nonetheless, they should know that tomorrow they may be in the opposition. Yeah, great. And it may be a huge challenge.
You highlight a very important point, Somna. During elections and even in governance, we focus so much at the center, the president, and the Nigerian president is said to have enormous powers. Perhaps it's time for constituents to also focus on who represents them at the federal and state level. But Chibuzo, let me come back to you. And not to play the devil's advocate, but when you read the president's statement commending the lawmakers today, he acknowledged the lawmakers for what he called diligent review of classified security briefings in underscoring the urgent need for intervention to prevent further escalation in Rivers State. Is it possible that the public has not been told the full picture and full story of, the security concerns that the president has raised and that the National Assembly has now backed up?
Well, yeah, that is also the purpose of the closed section. It's at that closed session that the compendium on the background information leading to that declaration is made available to every member. It's a confidential document. But the challenge is, anything could have been in that document. and they didn't have time to review it and even ask questions. And I agree, certain important national security concerns may have been raised in the document required, because when they rose from the closed door session, it appears that they've been baptized with new information on that the need for this to go on. But I see certain key factors. One is that it appears they have been sold the fact that this is the only way to bring peace to Rivers State, because the governor struggled to present budget after the Supreme Court judgment. It didn't work. There were issues about correspondence between these two arms of government. No one could receive correspondence from each other. They have also been told about important national security asset that is being targeted by certain group, including foreign extremists. They were also briefed about, other needs, which was why the House and the Senate started amending the proclamation order to the fact that there should be national peace committee, and that they should also invoke section 11(4) of the Constitution to provide oversight on the sole administrator. And some of us have argued that maybe the National Assembly actually failed the people of Rivers State since last year, when they could have invoked section 11(4) to take over the functions of the State Assembly. At the time, they had multiple speakers. They were not able to meet. Their State Assembly had been demolished, and that was the time to invoke section 11(4). For us in democracy, sole administrator represents darkness. There is no way the sole administrator can be interacting with the National Assembly, who are elected representative of the people. So I still believe, let him transmit his regulations to the president, and let the Ministry of Special Duties supervise him from the executive side, and let the Joint Committee of the National Assembly provide oversight, because you cannot have an important body like National Assembly come and make law for a sole administrator to implement. There is no connection between light and darkness.